Welcome to our mini-series, Beyond the Breaking Point and Healing the Whole Family. I am Tiffany Silva Herlin, a licensed clinical social worker, and today we are beginning a 3-part series that follows one family's journey through residential treatment at Discovery Ranch South. This conversation is for parents who are asking themselves, is outpatient enough? And wondering what the next step might look like. Through Becky and Katie's story, we hope to offer clarity, compassion, and hope. Please remember that this podcast is not a substitute for therapy. Always consult a licensed mental health professional regarding your family-specific needs. Let's dive in. Becky and Katie, thank you guys so much for joining us. I am so excited for our listeners to be here and hear your story today. So, such an honor to be able to talk to both of you today. Can you guys start with telling us a little bit about yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Katie. I come from a divorced family, and I suffered with just kind of general mental health, behavioral issues, and addiction pretty much from the age of, I'd say 13 up until I was 16.
Yeah, so my name is Becky, and I'm Katie's mom. We come from a pretty small family of just 3 originally, and we are now in a co-parenting situation with Katie, and we have, like I said, a very small family. My family lives out of state, so not a huge support system around us, and it created, a lot of challenges with raising a child. You really do need a lot of support system around you.
Yeah, and you guys come from a co-parenting family. Were you guys together, were your parents together when you were going through some of your struggles and at Discovery Ranch South, or?
Kind of. My kind of focus on my struggles started right after they got divorced, which was between kind of 12 and 13. And they were still kind of figuring out co-parenting as I was going into the ranch. And then when I got into the ranch, they kind of focused on my treatment a lot more than their kind of relational issues. And then once I came out and I became stable again, they started kind of finding their boundaries on where co-parenting is and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I do co-parenting myself. I have a previous marriage with my 2 older girls. I just have a lot of respect for parents that can co-parent. Having been there, it is not an easy task for your parents to be able to come together, especially to show up for you when there's other things also going on as well. So I just think that's so great that your parents have been able to figure that out and do that. Like, hats off to you. That is not an easy task at all.
From my perspective, it was a very difficult decision to decide to divorce or separate, and it wasn't really the one thing my daughter definitely was very strong about is that the divorce wasn't a factor. So she kept really a strong front to both of us, and I'm not sure if that was something that she felt she needed to do to protect us, and not put any blame on the divorce for some of her mental health issues. So as a parent, you really do think a lot about your child when you do decide to separate or to divorce. And for a lot of the treatment time and a lot of the struggles, very hard on myself about did I do the right thing? Was this a big contributing factor? I do think that it was a factor. I don't think it was the entire factor. I think there were other things going on, but as a parent, you want to put all that blame on you and what you may have done to create this scenario.
Absolutely. Having, again, been in a similar situation, of divorcing, you worry about your kids. You worry about how it's going to affect them, and do take on a lot of that guilt and shame of, did I, mess things up for my child? And I would like to say too, Becky, I think a lot of parents, whether they're divorced or not, whenever they have to place their child into treatment, I think there's just so much guilt that comes with that as a parent, right?
I think they hyper-analyze every aspect of their life to see, what caused it, when, it can both be environmental, but also it's a lot of the time just always been inside the kid and just has been slowly released as I think they're growing up. So that's definitely why I think that was a huge part of like my mom's thought process, was because that had just recently happened when I was going through the stuff I was going through. But for me, it was honestly kind of a relief that that kind of stage of our family was over, because it like the difference between being together as a broken family and being separated and just trying to figure out a family like that, I would have taken this over the broken family any day, because it honestly feels worse having them together, like arguing all the time and never finding a balance, than this situation, like being a co-parent. And so I know for sure that I was happier in this situation, and I think it was just some time to get used to it. And now that I am, it's like a lot easier for me. It makes sense. It's like it kind of feels like what my family was supposed to do.
I think that's an incredibly mature perspective, and sounds like you've done a lot of work to get there, which I'm excited to hear about, especially. Do you have anything to add, Becky? I want to make sure you get a chance.
One of the things I would add, because it's complex, these things they're multidimensional, and they're not just one event does not trigger this type of what I would consider escalating behavior or change. And Katie did mention environment, and the interesting thing is, when she was young, when she was a kindergartner, we made the choice for first grade to move to a small community that is very, very small, kind of affluent, thinking that she would be put into a social, environmental situation that would be really healthy for her. And in retrospect, I do think part of that decision to move to this smaller community, actually, in some cases, it created some good things, but in a lot of ways, there was so much pressure for her to be a certain way or have a certain lifestyle, or be able to not necessarily compete, but to kind of keep up with her peers. And that wasn't something that we were able to do. And I think that the environment that she then went through grade school into junior high or middle school, I think it was a factor in some of how she was feeling and how she was, how her coping strategies had developed.
Yeah, definitely the community I grew up in, the culture was very hushed. It was everything that went on for mental health and drug abuse and all that kind of stuff was very sheltered and kind of pushed under the rug, just because of just the money that circulated that community. And so parents really cared about their reputation. Yeah. Lots of them owned businesses and needed that to stay continuing providing income. And so I think just that culture made it feel like a norm to me as well. And so that kind of environment continued the pattern. But I definitely think I have lots and lots of part of me that is so grateful for where I grew up, because it's so safe. It's one of those places where you can let your kid walk home from school, or even walk home from their sports once it's dark out, and you're not worried about anything. They can walk home and everything's in walking distance. It's a great place. And lots of job opportunities for students and stuff like that. And so I thought that was super important, and I made some friends that I will remember for a lifetime. So
I love that you guys can both see now. You probably couldn't see then, and we're going to talk about how you got to this point, and especially in our next episode. But that it wasn't just on the divorce. It wasn't just on, say, your mom, and it wasn't just the environment. There were so many dynamics and things that contributed, but then yet still find the silver lining in it all. I mean, I can just tell as a therapist that you've done so much work and so much growth, which is amazing to see. I love it. I want to take one step back, if that's okay. why did you guys want to come on here and tell your story? Because you just mentioned, that you come from an affluent, environment that doesn't talk about these things. So why do you want to talk about it now?
I think for me, I really admire my story and kind of the ambition that I have put into my life, especially kind of just comparing it to a lot of people that I went to treatment with. I just can step back and be so grateful for how I ended up in the situations that I continue to put myself in. And I know that I think it's so helpful for girls that are in programs right now and girls that are coming right out of programs, that they hear more success stories than they do the normal statistics, the average, because it's just so important to be able to see beyond yourself and be able to just be like, okay, there is this potential. I'm not just doomed for the rest of my life. Yes, I feel better and I'm more stable, but my statistic is I'm not going to turn out good. I'm not going to get a good education. I'm not going to live in a good area for the rest of my life. And so hearing people that actually just kind of gritted their teeth and tried to get through it, I think is so important. And I think that I would be doing a disservice to myself and people around me if I didn't take advantages to show people that there is hope, there is an after treatment, there is an after this stage of life.
I love it.
And for me, I really want to try to destigmatize these programs. The only thing you tend to hear about are the stories that are negative, and we have a positive story to tell. And I'm very proud of my daughter, and I want to share that with people. And in a community like we live in, I want to talk about how proud I am, not about there is no secrets here. So my motivation is to try to demystify, destigmatize these programs, and also give people a glimpse into what can be done if you do take a step forward and you do take action to help your child, versus the way my daughter mentioned is sweeping it under the rug. Just nobody gets healthy that way.
Yeah, exactly. When we don't talk about these things, I think people worry that, if we talk about it, it's going to cause more people to have issues, right? It's actually just the opposite. The more we can talk about this and educate people and help people be aware, the more we can see those red flags sooner. Mm-hmm. The more people can feel safe to raise their hand and say, I'm struggling, and instead of being worried about your reputation or ruining something or, how people are going to judge you, it's no, this is safe. I need to talk about this. I need help. Our family needs help. We're normal. Everyone has some mental health issues at some point in their life. And honestly, maybe I'm a little biased because I'm a therapist. Everyone should get some therapy at some point in their life, including a therapist. I love that you guys are willing to come here today and share your story, because it's a pretty vulnerable thing. Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot of courage to tell your story, especially when the stories that get the most attention are the negative ones, and the ones that are maybe a little more hyped and glorified, glamorized, I think is the word I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. The negative ones, because those are the ones that get the attention. But yet, to every one of those, there's hundreds of amazing success stories like your own that I wish more people could hear. So thank you for showing up today, really. And it's an honor to be able to provide a platform for you to share your story. Mm-hmm. So let's start with when did you notice, I'm going to start with you, Becky. When did you notice that your daughter was struggling? What were some of the signs?
So some of the signs were she would self-isolate in her room. She would friends would come over, but she definitely kept them separate. There were these things where my intuition was telling me that something was going on, and one of the mantras I always have with my daughter is, lying is the problem. I love you. You can do anything, but don't lie. Just don't lie to me. Let's just try to stay truthful. And when I felt like she was lying, and I knew in my gut that she was. I wanted to believe that we had a pact of never to lie. So I believed her for a lot longer than I should have. I felt a little gullible at times, and I'll just give a very tangible example. She started burning incense in her room and got into a lot of like crystals and sage and a lot of that. And every teen is trying on different personalities and different to see what fits them. So I made the assumption that's what she was doing. But then when I thought I smelled marijuana, or even vaping, which was more of a problem, honestly, then I confronted her. I said, I think you're burning your incense to hide other smells. And she was very convincing at the time, and then made me question myself. So I was questioning myself rather than really trusting my gut. And I just, that was just one example of where different small little changes in her behavior started to get my attention. And that example, that was long before like the self-isolation. I knew it started to get really, I realized then I started doing research, started to think about things, started to read. And then when it, we have to acknowledge the fact that all of this sort of happened through COVID. So that was another contributing factor of self, like she couldn't socialize. We couldn't do things. So it was really hard to discern, is it the in COVID, or is she really not able to socialize in a healthy way? So that's part of how it first started for me, was these micro lies that turned into they just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
How about for you? Did you realize you were struggling at this time?
I think when I started realizing I was struggling was pretty much a couple weeks into when school started saying, oh, we're just off for 2 weeks. Oh, we're just going to postpone it another week. Mm-hmm. When we got a couple weeks into that, I kind of started realizing I was struggling pretty bad, and just not having motivation for anything. And also I feel like these small kind of just like mental health issues that I had that I had never really cared too much about or cared to prioritize just started getting magnified, and it just felt like it was starting to control my life. And it just like slowly, as I stopped seeing people and as I started not, like, I wouldn't say I didn't show up to class because I turned on the Zoom thing, but like as I very much didn't like participate and just kind of like caved in on myself, I just realized these things were kind of taking over, and I couldn't like get them out of my head like I used to be able to, because when I was in person and all that stuff, I'd be like, okay, I'm with my friends, or okay, I'm in class, like go away, like just don't bother me right now. And also a huge part of that, like, go away, don't bother me right now, with my mental health issues also was magnified when I was on some ADHD medication that really, really wasn't benefiting me, because I'd take it in the morning and then I would just kind of be this like medication zombie all day, and I wouldn't care about anything. I'm just there doing my thing, and then I'd come home and the medication would wear off, and I just like my whole like life would come back, and I'd only let that happen for a couple hours before I would like put myself to bed, because I'm like, I can't handle this anymore. I just want to go to bed and get on with my day.
So it sounded like the isolation of COVID, and then mental health issues that had been there, but ones that you didn't really pay attention to until they started getting bigger. And then I'm assuming other factors came in, the divorce, maybe other things that were happening, really kind of made you realize like, hey, I'm not doing okay.
Yeah. And then I was like, well, like, I know that so many people online are talking about how there's all these mental health issues during COVID and all this stuff, but the people that are actually around me and my friends and all this stuff, like, aren't struggling with that. They're all okay. They're all happy. They're all fine. And I'd rather fit in with the people that I can hang out with and try to hang out with in person than people that are talking to me online. And so that's when I was like kind of trying to hide it and very much just be like, no, everybody else is okay. Like I should be fine. And then as I continued to try to push it down and it got worse, I started cycling through friends really fast, like always trying to find new friends because I feel like I wasn't fitting in with the ones that I was with. And then that's kind of how the drug abuse started, is because those kind of people and those kind of friends are who like very much wanted me around and to hang out, and I felt most included in, which is a classic like addiction and user sign, because nobody wants to use by themselves. They always want to feel like there's somebody there to justify it with them. And so that's kind of the friends that I started getting attached to and felt like really wanted me around. And then I realized like drugs can be a coping mechanism at the time. And I was like, this can make me feel better because it's making other people feel better. And I was like, this is great. I'm gaining friends from it. And I feel like I'm silencing what's in my head.
Yeah, you just kind of explained textbook, classic example of you don't fit in, right? And yet, so you find this group that accepts kind of all the, people who don't quite fit in, right? And then you have this community, and then on top of that, you're self-medicating, which makes you feel better. So there's this, dopamine cycle that's going on, but not in a positive way, right? Becky, do you have anything to add?
I do, because I think when you're watching it from the parental perspective, you're seeing it happening. You're confronting or asking the questions, but your child, your daughter, they're not seeing it. They feel like you're intruding in a positive community cycle, and that's where that's where it started getting really confrontational between us. Because I was trying to help her see things that she was blind to, right? The other thing that sort of occurred in that whole sort of time frame, and maybe this is too early to talk about because it was at the tail end of COVID and where it got really tough between her and I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I think in my what I saw happen, I think she got very scared, but what she was showing me was just absolute defiance. Even on the day of my surgery, I came home and she just would not. I said, before going into surgery, I said, could you, for today, just stick around the house? Like my sister had come into town to help care for me, and I just asked, really, could you stick around? Because I don't have physical or mental capacity to worry about you being away from the house today, of all days. And I'd love to hear her perspective on this, but she just didn't want, she left the house. And I was struggling so much just to recover, right, at home. And that was the moment where I am like, if she can't do this one thing for me under these circumstances, I think it's beyond, she's beyond what I'm capable of convincing her or having her see. That was, for me, the time I was like, oh no, we really need to work on this. Like, something's really hard. And my sister was there also, so I had another adult perspective who raised 3 children and had a perspective and was just so upset on my behalf. And I just said, I can't take it, so just go if you're going to go. And to Katie, that was a permission. So when I said, fine, just go to whatever she wanted to do, she was like, okay, I have permission, while it was me saying, I can't handle it anymore.
For me, that was definitely towards the end of before I went off to treatment. And I think at that point, I was just so deep in the hole of like genuine, like hard, like drug abuse. And so I just like, when I think back on it, I first off can barely remember it. Like the memory there is like very faint, but I know that I just like, even thinking back at it, I can't find even the reason I was telling myself it was okay. Like at the time, what the reason was that it was okay and fine. And so it just kind of tells me a lot thinking back on that period, that it was like I was so like hypnotized by the state of life I was in that like there was no reasoning with me. There was nothing you could say or do or situation that would get me to act like a normal human being. It was just like my way or the highway, because that's what matters to me. Like nobody else matters. It's what makes me happy and what's going to keep this cycle going of keeping my mind quiet and keeping everything else quiet.
I mean, that's real addiction, right? Is when you get to a point that it's what you want and it's your world, and that your relationships or whatever outcome may happen, you don't care about, right? Like your mom's getting surgery for breast cancer, which is a huge deal, right? And yet you're not willing to stick around because it doesn't benefit you. I mean, that is addiction. That's when you know, hey, we've got a serious problem that is affecting like really close relationships at that point in your life. And Mom, I just want to give you some recognition of what a amazing mom you are, first of all. As I'm hearing you tell this story, just sounds like you had so much love for her. You said that you felt gullible, but I would just kind of argue that you were a mom who loved your daughter, who wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, who wanted to trust and believe, which is a very healthy and normal thing as a parent, right? To want to be in that place. And it makes sense that when you are going through some serious trauma of breast cancer and that your daughter's not willing to stick around for it, that would make sense, that would be a breaking point for you to say, like, this is above me. Like, I no longer have the skill set and the support and ability to manage what's happening with my daughter. And I think a lot of our parents listening get to that point, right? Where it's like, they may blame themselves, but the reality is they're loving, amazing parents who no longer have what they need to support their child. And that's when you have to start seeking out other help, right? Which is scary.
And that's exactly like that. It all sort of, it was an interesting serendipitous like events that occurred. Without that moment, I wouldn't have gotten to the moment where you can go, either I'm not going to try, like I'm just going to give up and let my daughter do whatever she wants, and that's the decision some parents make, right? And that it's a phase. I feel like people like to liken things to phases. Oh, they're just going through a phase. And I knew for my daughter, and I knew her well enough to know that her personality type, even if this was started as a phase, it was not going to end well. Like her personality type gets very hyper fixated on whatever it is. And I realized that she was there with this, knew I didn't have the skills, but I was not going to give up. Like there's no, I have one and done, one daughter. I have a lot of time and energy to be sure that one daughter is going to end up on a healthy path to adulthood. And that's when I approached her. And I think we actually, whether she remembers it or not, we did have it may have been argumentative. It may have been a lot of raised voices, but after that happened in like the May time frame. And she was I'm moving out. She's packing her stuff and she's going to move out. And instead of, me saying absolutely not, there's no way, you're never moving out, I'm like, okay, where are you moving to? Where are you going? And if you're going somewhere, let's make sure it's a healthy place. Like, let's make sure it's a place that you feel safe and healthy. And that was how I opened the door to having her be a part of the decision. She had mentioned, I'm going to move in with, parents of a friend who was one of the group of people that were using. And I said, I'm pretty sure that parent is not ready for another child, like, and I think you did get confirmation that in fact, you know, there was really nowhere for you to go, and maybe that's why you were open to having a real discussion about what to do next.
Yeah, your mom mentioned before this, when we were talking on the phone, that you were part of the decision and you realized you needed help. Can you tell our listeners, because that's not very common.
Yeah.
Let me just add, I love that you got to that point. If our parents can get their kids to that point, it's a miracle and amazing. And you know, their child is going to do so much better in treatment. The ones that choose to come, right? So help our listeners here, like, how did you get there?
Yeah, it was definitely kind of like a Hail Mary situation where, yeah, like I had packed up so many bags and I was ready to leave, and I was like, I didn't really want input from my parents about where I was going. I just wanted to leave and figure it out on my own. And that was definitely not a choice or a doorway they were giving me. And so I don't really super remember the time between when we finally got me to put my bags away kind of thing and when we got on the phone with the ed consultant. But I know when I was on the phone with the ed consultant, because we did multiple sessions and talked about a lot of different situations, I just remember almost feeling like it was a challenge a little bit, where it was like I can't even describe it, but it was like a challenge, like, oh, like you want to send me away? Like, okay, well, I get to pick where I'm getting sent away to, and like I'm going to make it as easy as I can for myself.
Okay.
And I just like, I think also like subconsciously I knew I had been in the same exact loop of my days. Like my days are the exact same every single day for almost 3 years at this point. And I think I was like subconsciously getting bored, really, really bored. And I was like, I want to do something new. I want to try something else. And so that was kind of why I think I was so open to being a part of the process. Was I know I have major like control issues, and I know most people going through addiction do, because it's the only thing they can grab onto is trying to control what they can, because the rest of their life is just like a hurricane. And so that's kind of what got me to sit down on the phone with the ed consultant and have 3 or 4 therapy sessions. And then after that, sit down on the phone 1 or 2 more times about, okay, these are the places that I think would be really good for you. And then we would go, okay, so the first one was an IOP or like a PHP. And I was like, if I'm going to be honest, that's not going to help me. Like, that if I'm coming home at night or if I'm coming home on the weekends, that's the same situation. I'm sleeping at home. I'm able to see the same people if I wanted to. Like, it doesn't help. And I was able to admit that both to my parents and to the ed consultant. And then the second option was a therapeutic boarding school near home, and they usually asked kids to go home over the weekend so they could clean the facility. And that was the same situation. And then we kind of got to Wilderness, which was pretty hard kind of conversation, because it would have been really good for me, and it like half of it kind of sound like it would be a little bit fun to go out camping for 3 months or whatever. But after really talking about it and realizing the reality with how much addiction I had been through at this point at such a young age, my body wouldn't have been able to like survive it genuinely. And I think we all had to kind of admit that situation, because usually Wilderness is a very, very good solution for a lot of kids that go through addiction for a long time, because it is like the hardest restart you can go through. And so I think that was a hard thing to admit, that wasn't something we were going to do. And then that's when DRS came up, and I was like, okay, like this doesn't sound as bad. And I was like, all right, like it's a facility away from home, and I sleep here, and the pictures I saw looked like my old summer camps. And so I was like, okay. And they were like, yeah, it's like a kind of long-term program. And so we were like, all right, like I think this might be a fit. And we went on a tour. So we flew out to Cedar City, and we went on a tour, and I liked the people. Like, the facility was really nice. The girl that I got to tour with was really sweet, and she very much felt like a friend from home, like not like some girl that was just forced to give me a tour. Like, it was very much like genuine, and we were laughing and joking and talking about genuine stuff. And I'm a huge animal person. Like, animals have a special place in my heart. So getting to the idea of raising cows and being around all these livestock was so incredible. And so that was on a Tuesday, and we flew home, and I was like, all right, I kind of just as well Hail Married it. I was like, okay, let's go. Let's do it. And I literally packed up my bag, said goodbye, and it was there on Friday.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a unique story. I love it. And I love your kind of defiance and need to be in control actually benefited you so much, which I think is good for some parents to hear, that if your child does seek for control, helping them feel like they have buy-in and they have a say can really pay off, right?
Yeah. As manipulative as it might sound, if parents can take advantage of those struggles that kids go through, it might help them a lot, because obviously I know my story with not choosing my own treatment, and then I've also lived with girls and talked with people actually outside of my program that have gotten
it's a transportation service.
Being able to choose where you go is going, and maybe not when, but where you're going can 100%, I think, help somebody's treatment. And so for parents that are trying to work through this process right now, or even have another kid that might be going through treatment, it is so important that, like, you just work with somebody to try to take advantage of how to get your kid there without it being forceful, kind of thing. It's just like, work with them of like, would you be open to going to a summer camp over the summer? Okay, what do you want to do over that summer? Like, what's a fun activity? And kind of seeing, okay, they want to go to a summer camp, they want to work with animals, or they want to go camping or whatever. Be like, okay, well, we have this, we talked with some people, and there's this program that is like a summer camp, but it also really helps with just like when kids are struggling and their minds are hurting. And so just kind of like softly approaching it as best as you can, and just kind of make it appealing and be like, is this something you would want to do? If not, show me some other places you would want to go.
We fast forwarded to kind of how we got into treatment, and I think parents might want to hear a little bit more about some of the signs that as a parent I was watching and seeing. And just because that, and it does help. I've had a good relationship with my daughter the entire time. Like, there was safety for her with me, I believe. And that's part of what helped this happen. And there was just a few other moments that I want to mention that happened over the summer. She does ride horses. She's a hunter jumper. She's very good at it. And I always thought if I could keep her involved in a healthy outlet and that would help. And there was another moment when she was showing at a show that she wanted to go very desperately to. And I agreed, and we went, and she was, when she stopped being able to focus on something she loved, like riding, and she allowed her drug habit and I'm going to bring it up, this is very common in girls, promiscuity, like very much on the borderline of that type of thing. We were at a horse show, and she was doing both, edibles, because I found some and thought they were candy, as well as just hanging out with some of the young men that were working the show and dragging the arena and working with horses. That was really where it got me very scared, because now I know that she's not even able to stay focused on the healthy things that she really enjoyed. And I'm not sure if that was a moment. And again, I think there was a big span of time where my daughter was so deep in it that a lot of the things she doesn't remember the same way I remembered things. But that was the summer where that was just the months before going into the program. Those months we were talking with what Katie calls ed consultant, an education consultant, in order to help kind of guide us through this process. And that's not, you don't have to have one of those to guide you through the process. I'm sure there's many, many resources that are free that can help you. But for us, it was the route we ended up going. But it was both the acceleration of her behavior. It wasn't just once every month something would happen. It started happening all the time. And then when she started not doing the things that she loved doing were starting to suffer. Those were the signs to me that this is not something she's controlling at all.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think she would pick riding horses and doing shows because it's super important to her over anything. But when that stopped happening and she was taking risks on because she knew that was the one leverage point of if you do this, then there's no horse show. If you do that, then there's no riding this week. Which then I rode the horse one week, but which probably made her more mad than actually not getting to ride is seeing her mother on the horse, right? So, and just butchering the ride completely. Anyway, I just want to emphasize if your child is not enjoying the things that they've always enjoyed, then that is another very, very important sign not to ignore.
I think that's a great point. I'm glad you took a step back because I actually wanted to. Yes, if they no longer have joy or desire to do the things that brought them joy once, right? And that was a high priority for them that's healthy. Or they're doing risky behavior that could cause them to lose those privileges. Yeah, absolutely a red sign. Not a red sign. Absolutely a red flag. At that point, I do want to ask, did she try outpatient before you sought out an educational consultant?
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up. We did for many years, like 2 full years of outpatient therapy with at least 2 different therapists. And I think she can tell you more. I feel like she was just calling it in. She was going through the motions and really not touching on what was really bothering her. She was looking at surface issues, like it turned into complaining about boyfriends or social interactions. Like it was never really about her, and so part of the reason that didn't work was because I don't think she was taking it serious. We also did do family therapy prior to even the divorce. So we did try outpatient options that they weren't enough. Is kind of my impression of that. And I was seeing a therapist. She was seeing her own therapist. Her dad was seeing a therapist. So we were all trying our best to do this. And then we all tried to do a therapist together. That didn't work out. And so we did, sometimes you run out of options.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember starting therapy, and when the first time I started therapy with just an individual therapist, I loved the environment. The therapist was really nice. The property was really nice. They had horses and all that kind of stuff. But I think I just didn't understand it all the way. I was so used to just bottling the genuine hard emotions and mental health that I was struggling with, that I didn't really know what I was supposed to talk about in therapy. I just talked about the stuff that was bothering me every day, the kind of oh, my friend did this and it really made me mad, or arguments that I'd have with my parents and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know how to tap into that, like, kind of that fountain of not, like, healthy. And I think also a part of that is, like, I know it's a therapist's job to say, oh, this is a safe space, whatever you want to talk about, you can talk about. But as, like, somebody that just started therapy, I was like, I don't know what to talk about. Like, what am I supposed to get into? And so I was very just like, okay, I don't know. And then I don't remember what made us move from that one place, but I know we moved to a different therapist, and I was with another therapist, and I did her, I think, once or twice a week, and then I did group therapy once a week, and I just didn't connect with that therapist at all. So I was just like, now I don't really want to talk at all about anything. And then the group therapy, I felt like I really couldn't connect with anybody's issues. I felt like a lot of people were in really, really hard, like, family financial situations, and that created so many struggles for them, like not having food on the table, and parents all never being home because they had to be at jobs, and so they had to take care of their younger siblings and all that kind of stuff. And then other kids were like having like more like disorder related mental health issues, which I couldn't relate to because I didn't have them. And so that was kind of the two groups of kids that I was with, and I just felt like I was like, I don't belong talking about stuff. So I'd kind of just sit there and be like, okay, like, and I felt like I was like a special case of issues because for my like life, I shouldn't have anything to complain about. Yeah, my parents got divorced, but it's the easiest divorce I've ever seen happen. It's not messy and all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, I don't have any of that to complain about in front of these kind of people. And then also I don't have these disorders that I can't like get rid of and that are chronic. And so I was like, I just don't feel like I have a place to talk here. Like, I feel like I'm just going to get perceived as like ungrateful and all that kind of stuff. So, and I think that situation is kind of when I started giving up on therapy, because I was like, I don't feel connected with the therapist, and I don't feel like I belong in this group therapy. And I'm like, I just like, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to deal with this. And I definitely can say I struggled with that coming out of treatment as well, very, very heavily.
I'm going to add real quick because now that we're talking about it, some things are coming back to me. So therapy, right? Outpatient therapy. We started with cognitive behavioral therapy. That was the first, and that's the therapy like I was in. And Katie, that was the first place where you were going to with the horses. And we always thought that's something where you can put a buffer between the person, and then we thought it would be good. That the second therapeutic approach we took when CBT wasn't really working was DBT, and that was the group therapy, because we were thinking, hey, there could be a different approach that's a little bit more prescriptive. It's a lot more action oriented. It's so we thought that could help, and we did that for almost for a year. So CBT for about a year, switched gears when things weren't working or getting better, and she was going twice a week to therapy, and then we moved to the DBT, and I got some value out of that, but we realized that wasn't getting us anywhere either. But we did try both for an entire year, because you've got to try long enough to know whether it's gonna work. And the therapist that you felt like you didn't connect with, Katie, was the DBT therapist, and that was all remote. It was all virtual.
Oh, yeah.
And I also we cannot discount the massive difference between in-person modalities and virtual. So I want to bring that up.
Yeah.
I agree. I think trying to connect, especially with a teenager or anyone younger, you've got to do it in person. It's okay to maybe go virtually once there is that connection, but that in person just makes such a bigger difference. It's easier to just be so disconnected, because I think at your age, everything is online, everything's virtual. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to be like, yeah, I'm here, but I'm not really here.
And it's like when you do stuff in person nowadays, it's so you stand out to somebody. You don't, because online you're doing everything online, as you said, but if you're there in person and you're doing all that, that makes an impact on somebody because they're not used to it. And so you kind of make a mark on somebody, and I think that's super important to be able to do that.
Yeah, and let's also talk about outpatient is incredibly beneficial, yet it has limitations because as a therapist who does outpatient, you only know so much. Mm-hmm. You only know how much your client is telling you, and sometimes they don't tell you all the other things. And knowing where to challenge them and hold them accountable, but yet still have them come back to therapy. And then there's so many other variables outside of the office, right? Like that you don't have control over or know about. And it just makes it a little more challenging when there are as big of issues that you were facing, right?
Exactly.
So it sounds like you guys really tried to extinguish and try every resource available to you, which is an important step for our parents to do, right? You don't obviously just want to jump to residential treatment. Can you inform our listeners of what, we've mentioned this a lot, but what is an educational consultant and how do they find one if they are seeking treatment?
So an educational consultant is it's a paid for service and it's a consultative approach to understanding this treatment environment, or there's just so many choices. So they get to know your child through multiple interviews. They get to know the family through multiple interviews, understand some of the challenges, and then they go and identify programs that might fit the need, and then come back and present you with options. And that's what when I was trying to figure out what the steps were after outpatient, I did a lot of my own research and ended up finding out a good friend, a colleague of mine's wife actually was an educational consultant, and part of the reason she became one of those was because they had to put one of their children through a program, and with that exposure, she wanted to help other families. So it's not an inexpensive proposition, and in what I've since learned is if you are want to be fully engaged, you could probably find the same resources, but we felt like we were running out of time. Like we felt like we didn't have the time. We needed somebody to help us reduce the timeline from and had, because many of them have visited the programs, observed the programs in person, take all the data that we mentioned earlier in the podcast around statistics and the stories that are typically negative that come out. So they help balance all of that information, because if you are just a layman parent trying to learn about this whole industry, really, it can be pretty scary. And so you've got to make sure you have a balanced perspective coming from a non-biased organization, and I think of educational consultants as that, a non-biased, helping match your child and your family's needs with a program, and that's how we found DRS.
I also think it's super important to mention that if you are in a situation where an ed consultant isn't in reach, whether that is like your area, your financial situation, most kids are in public schools, and it is so important to reach out to your public school or your private school or the therapist that your kid's going to about these kind of resources, because that is a completely free way to talk, because every school has some kind of mental health sector nowadays, and it's so important to reach out to them, because not only can they help you find a program that will be best for your kid, because again, they have teachers that watch your kid all day. Going through the steps that you need to with them is so important to be able to take away those blockade variables.
Yeah. Becky, you did a great job explaining what an educational consultant does and how amazing they can be to help you navigate a very overwhelming world and industry, especially when you're in crisis, trying to help your child. And also, Katie, you've mentioned a great thing too as well, that if you can't afford it or there's reasons why you can't find someone, you can still find ways to find these programs and to find help for your child. So I love both of these perspectives, absolutely. as we're trying to wrap up this episode, and you guys have told an amazing story of like where things started, how you found Discovery Ranch South, and how the help you found along the way and the resources you tried. I just have a few last questions for you. What made you choose out of state versus in state? Because
we live in Washington State, so I mean, if you are in a state that has that allows for these types of programs, like we didn't really have an option in our state. So we didn't have an option in our state, and when we were given some choices, they were mostly out of state. One was Hawaii, and I was very much on board with that one.
Know about that
one? Yes, please.
No, but in all seriousness, it wasn't really an option for our state, and so and then when the consultant came back with some options, we took one of those. And honestly, once we talk in maybe a future episode about all the things that have occurred within our family, it'll become pretty interesting how the program in Utah really set Katie on a bigger, broader path to where she is today. So it was almost predestined that we ended up in the state of Utah, which is such a beautiful state, and we are outdoorsy people. So it definitely was the right choice. We didn't know at the time, but somebody, a greater being figured it out for us and helped us find this program, we think.
And I think on my side as the kid in the situation, every state has different regulations when it comes to treatment centers and what's allowed and what's not allowed. I think it is so important to pick a state that is very strict in the ways that they have access to lots of things, because there's some states where if a kid runs away, they can't go after them. They can't do any of that. And so I think like Utah and a bunch like Montana and all that kind of stuff are states that really should be looked at, because they have the kind of laws and regulations that can save your kid's life, whether that's because they have access to really good medical or they have policies that say, yes, you are allowed to make sure this kid doesn't run away, make sure that they don't hurt themselves or hurt other people.
Make sure they're safe.
Exactly. Yep. Make sure they're safe. And so I think it's so important to look at every state's regulations and how loose or tight they are, because these policies will change the course of how their treatment goes. And so it's very important, as much as like some of the policies may seem like strict or maybe like kind of crossing boundaries, I would rather somebody pick somewhere that will go above and beyond than somewhere that'll take their hands off because of laws and all that kind of stuff. It's so important that you have more protection than less, whether it seems invasive or not. And so I think that is a big part that I'm grateful for now afterwards, is that there was so many more regulations saying, yes, you can make sure this kid doesn't run away. And so picking a program in a state that can just go and help your kid is the most important wherever it is.
I love that. I think it's really scary to send your child out of state. I think it's hard to leave your state as a child. So that leads me to maybe one of my last few questions is, what were some of your biggest fears of leaving and mom sending your daughter away?
For me, my biggest fear was that she would never forgive me, or that she would resent me for this. Even though she was part of the choice, it still hurts to have her away, and then for her to, because at a point they do start questioning how hard the work is to do.
Yep. Even
and
if
at that point, you're the target. The safest person, the closest person typically is the target. So I thought, I was scared that my daughter would resent me and be very angry with me long term.
How about for you? And that makes perfect sense, that you would be worried that, will my daughter be angry at me? Will she never talk to me again? And will they know that I love them still? Things like that is very typical.
I think I was very scared of like, what does my life look like after this? Like, nobody around me has ever done this or anything even close to this, because the people that are as bad as I was are still at home, and they're still just doing what they do, and they have no plans of changing it. And so not having anybody to look at, I was like, what's gonna happen? And so I was very scared about like, my life is like going on pause for the next year. Mm-hmm. Like that, like I have nothing, like all I'm doing is myself right now. And so that was really hard. Like with my sports, like I was like, wow, my life's going on pause for a year. I'm missing a year. And I was worried about school, but as I got into the program, that got a lot less scary. And I also was very scared of like coming home and being like, I'm going to have no friends. I'm going to have like, I don't know what I'm going to have. And it is like fixing my mental health and all these issues gonna be benefit enough to cover the damages that me leaving for a year is gonna cause?
It's a huge sacrifice to ask any child or teenager to step away from their friends, their school, everything they know, to kind of start over again and maybe not see those people again, have to, so yeah, there's that big gap and unknown and limbo that you're stepping into, and having to take a step of faith, honestly, to hopefully save yourself and have a better future. And there's no guarantee because, as you know, you have to make that choice.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think my biggest thing that I would just say to parents is like, it is really scary to send your kid away, and it is really scary with usually your kid's reaction, but like 10 out of 10 times you are saving your child's life. And it is so important to at least do your part in saving your kid's life and leaving the ball in their court and saying, okay, now it's up to you to want to save your life or not. And those kids, when they go to treatment, now we can say 7 or 5 times out of 10, those kids will want that will to change their life. And it's so important that parents do their step in doing it so they can pass the ball to the kid, because when a kid is in addiction or drowning in their mental health, they can't even reach the ball at that point. They're stuck and they're crawling. And it's like, and if you need as a parent, if you need encouragement to do it and take that like leap of faith, just find anyone on the internet to talk, a parent or a child on the internet that you can see have a similar story, like struggling with a similar thing. I bet you if you message them and say, this is what I'm struggling and I don't know what to do, I think I need to send my kid to treatment, but I'm scared, I guarantee they will message you back in a heartbeat and say, do it. This is so important to do. And so it's scary and it's heartbreaking, but you are saving your child's life.
I don't know if I have anything to add to that, because that was so incredibly powerful. It honestly kind of got me emotional to hear from your mouth, having gone through this, to know that it saved your life, and that as hard as it was to step away from all your friends and your community and the unknown and your parents even, that it was the best thing that your parents could have done. And I think parents don't realize that ultimately their child will feel their love of that huge sacrifice you have to make to send your child away, when you've tried every resource and you've used all your skills and it's just not enough.
Yeah.
And your child's life is at risk, and this is the next best thing and the hardest thing.
Yeah. And it's okay to admit that you can't fix something as a parent. It's okay to admit that you are out of control. You can't fix your child. It's okay to admit that. It doesn't mean you're a bad parent or that you missed a step in the parenting book. It just means that that child has taken their free will and taken it outside of a place that you can help them. And so never feel like it's a bad thing that you can't help your kid, because there are so many people that won't admit it that are out of control.
Absolutely. And that ultimately it's your child's choice to want to change. You can, set all these resources and give them all the things that they need, but they have to be the ones to decide that I'm going to take it and run with this. Becky, what would you tell parents who are listening?
I would say that the guilt is real, but your self-talk can help you realize that when you don't have a control or a skill, that you do need to reach for help. And I think Katie mentioning the fact that she is free. Your children are free will. You can only basically shepherd them. You can only help guide them, but you can't make their decisions. You can create parameters to help them try to make the best decisions for themselves, but oftentimes you still aren't making the decisions. They are not in your preview for like many hours out of the day. So they have to be able to make good choices for themselves on their own. And it's again, guilt is real, and you need to help yourself get through the fact that it should be, rather than guilt, you should think this is the best parenting option I have right now. And it's more, you're not outsourcing your parenting, you are extending your capabilities as a parent.
Well, you're asking a team to step in and help you, right? You're asking for that support. You're holding this big boulder, trying to move it up a hill, and it's not going anywhere. And you're realizing, I can't do this on my own. So you're not giving up the boulder. You're asking people to step behind you and help push, is really what it is. Mm-hmm. I have loved hearing your story up to this point so much. Thank you for coming on and sharing with our listeners, who I think really need to hear this, what it was like that led you up to treatment, because that is a vulnerable, hard story to tell. Again, like I said, it takes a lot of courage. It's been such an honor to hear your story up to this point, and I'm excited for our next episode to hear what it was like once you entered treatment. Because from what I hear, you thought it was just going to be a few months, even though you chose it. So we're going to be talking in our next episode what actually happens when your child arrives at treatment and how families survive, say, the early days. So again, thank you guys for your honesty and your openness, and I'm excited to continue this journey with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.